The Kansas summer heat hit me like a wall as I stepped out of my rental car. My Louboutins sank slightly into the gravel parking lot of Prairie View Elementary. What the damn hell was I thinking, trading my air-conditioned Manhattan office for this? "You must be Miss Butler," a voice called out. I turned to see a tall blonde vision approaching, her green eyes sparkling. She moved with the unmistakable grace of a model, yet wore simple jeans and a white cotton shirt. "Claire, please," I managed, suddenly conscious of my overdressed state in designer wear. "You're the other volunteer?" "Natasha Edwards," she smiled, extending her hand. "Former runway model, current seeker of meaning." Her touch lingered a moment longer than necessary, sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. We walked together into the small school building, our heels clicking in sync on the worn linoleum floor. The art room was a mess of dusty supplies and forgotten projects. "These kids haven't had an art program in 3 years," Natasha explained, rolling up her sleeves. I found myself watching her as we cleaned. The way she moved, purposeful yet graceful, was mesmerizing. "I've seen you in magazines," I blurted out, immediately regretting my lack of subtlety. She laughed, a genuine sound that echoed off the walls. "And now, you'll see me covered in dust and paint. Quite the career change, right?" We spent hours setting up the darkroom in what used to be a storage closet. The space was tight, forcing us to brush against each other as we worked. Each accidental touch sent electricity through my body. In the red safety light, her features took on an otherworldly quality. "Why did you really come here?" I asked, helping her hang light-blocking curtains. "A successful model doesn't just disappear to teach in rural Kansas." She paused, considering. "Same reason as you, I suspect. Looking for something real." Her eyes met mine in the dim light. Sometimes life in the spotlight feels hollow. The next morning, our first class arrived, 12 eager faces, ranging from 10 to 13 years old. Natasha had a natural way with them, while I fumbled with my city manners. But when I demonstrated how to use a camera, explaining light and shadow, I saw the spark of creativity ignite in their eyes. "You're a natural teacher," Natasha whispered as we watched the kids experiment with composition. Her breath tickled my ear, making my heart race. I turned to respond and found her face inches from mine. Time seemed to stop as we stood there, possibility hanging in the air between us. A crash from the other side of the room broke the moment. Little Tommy had knocked over a tripod. We jumped apart, both laughing nervously as we went to help. But something had shifted between us, like the first hint of dawn breaking through darkness. That evening, as we cleaned up after class, our hands met reaching for the same camera lens. Neither of us pulled away immediately. In the golden Kansas sunset streaming through the windows, I saw my own longing reflected in her eyes. This was definitely not part of the volunteer teaching program I'd signed up for. But sometimes I thought, watching her demonstrate proper camera grip to a student the next day, the best things in life come when you least expect them. I just never imagined finding myself in a rural Kansas classroom, falling for a supermodel-turned-teacher, while trying to inspire young minds through photography. The weeks flew by in a blur of shutter clicks and developing solution. Our students took to photography like ducks to water, their raw talent surprising even me. But what surprised me more was how naturally Natasha and I fell into sync, anticipating each other's moves, finishing each other's sentences. "Look at this composition," I said one afternoon, holding up a student's photo. "Sarah's really getting the hang of negative space." Natasha leaned over my shoulder, her perfume making my head spin slightly. "She's got your eye for detail," Natasha replied, her fingers brushing mine as she took the photo. These little touches had become more frequent, each one sending sparks through my system. The kids noticed our chemistry too. "Miss Butler, you smile different when Miss Edwards is around," little Maria observed one day, making me nearly drop my camera. Natasha just winked at me across the room, causing my cheeks to flush. Our after-class sessions grew longer. We'd spend hours in the art room, organizing supplies and discussing everything from fashion shoots to philosophy. Natasha told me about her disillusionment with the modeling world, while I shared my struggles as a female editor in a male-dominated industry. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a part," she confessed one evening, perched on a desk as the setting sun painted her golden. "But here, teaching these kids, I feel real for the first time." I understood completely. My high-powered editorial position suddenly seemed hollow compared to watching a child's face light up when their first photo developed, or seeing Natasha demonstrate lighting techniques, her passion infectious. Then came the storm. We were reviewing contact sheets when the tornado warning sounded. The summer sky turned an ominous green, and within minutes, rain was hammering against the windows. "Guess we're stuck here," Natasha said, pulling out emergency candles as the power flickered. The art room felt different in the candlelight, more intimate. We sat on the floor, sharing the emergency chocolate bars I kept in my desk. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she whispered, the storm raging outside. Her green eyes reflected the candlelight, mesmerizing me. "I'm terrified of failing these kids," I admitted. "In the city, everything's about circulation numbers and ad revenue. Here, it matters in a different way." She reached for my hand in the darkness. "You're not failing anyone, Claire. These kids adore you." She paused, biting her lip. "I adore watching you with them." Thunder crashed outside, making us both jump. We ended up laughing, hands still clasped, sitting closer than before. The air between us felt charged, like the storm had somehow crept into the room. "When I first saw you in those ridiculous heels on the gravel," Natasha said softly, "I thought you'd last maybe 2 days. But you proved me wrong. You're full of surprises, Claire Butler." I turned to face her, our shoulders touching. "Good surprises, I hope?" "The best kind," she whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so tender it made my heart ache. We talked through the night, sharing stories and secrets as the storm raged. When dawn finally broke, something had shifted between us. The pretenses were gone, replaced by something raw and real. Back in Wichita that weekend, I couldn't focus on my magazine layouts. All I could think about was Natasha's laugh, her grace with the students, the way she looked in candlelight. I knew I was falling hard, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to fight it. Monday morning, I arrived early to set up the darkroom. Natasha was already there, looking fresh despite our sleepless night. "I had an idea," she said, eyes sparkling with mischief. "How would you feel about doing a proper photo shoot?" The magazine studio in downtown Wichita felt like another world compared to our rural classroom. Natasha moved through the space with familiar ease while I fiddled nervously with my camera settings. "Relax, Claire," she said, adjusting the lighting. "You've shot hundreds of models before." "Not you," I muttered, more to myself than her. She wore a vintage silk dress that caught the light like liquid gold. My hands trembled slightly as I framed the first shot. But as we fell into rhythm, something magical happened. Natasha wasn't just posing, she was dancing with my lens, anticipating each shot before I called it. Through my viewfinder, I watched her transform from the casual teacher I knew into something ethereal. "These are incredible," I breathed, reviewing the digital previews. Natasha peered over my shoulder, her warmth radiating against my back. "You make my job easy," she whispered, her breath tickling my ear. Marcus, my trusted photographer, whistled as he walked past. "Best shoot I've seen in months, Claire. You two have something special going on here." If he only knew how right he was. The chemistry between us was becoming harder to ignore. Every adjustment of a pose, every shared glance, felt charged with possibility. "Let's try some in the darkroom," I suggested, my voice huskier than intended. The familiar red glow welcomed us as we stepped inside. Natasha leaned against the developing table, the crimson light casting shadows that emphasized her cheekbones. "Show me how you want me," she said softly. The double meaning hung in the air between us. I stepped closer, ostensibly to adjust her pose. My fingers brushed her bare shoulder, and I felt her shiver. "Like this," I murmured, turning her slightly toward the light. Our faces were inches apart. I could see each fleck of gold in her green eyes, count every perfect eyelash. "Claire," she whispered, and the way she said my name undid me completely. I'm not sure who moved first. Maybe we both did. But suddenly my camera was forgotten, and her lips were on mine. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. Then Natasha's hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and gentleness gave way to hunger. She tasted like mint and possibility. My fingers tangled in her hair as years of unspoken longing poured into that single moment. A knock at the door made us spring apart. "Claire, the art director needs those test shots," Marcus called through the door. "Just a minute," I managed, my voice embarrassingly shaky. Natasha pressed her forehead against mine, both of us breathing hard. "Well," she said with a small laugh, "that wasn't in the shot list." I touched my lips, still tingling from her kiss. "I've wanted to do that since the first day in that dusty classroom." Me too, she admitted, straightening my now rumpled blouse, though I pictured it with fewer chemicals around. We managed to finish the shoot, though every look now carried the weight of our shared secret. The photos captured something raw and real, a woman on the cusp of transformation, or maybe that was just me, seeing my own awakening reflected in every frame. Later, reviewing the contact sheets in my office, I couldn't stop reliving that moment in the darkroom. The way her lips felt against mine, how perfectly we fit together, the small sound she made when I pulled her closer. My phone buzzed with a text from Natasha. "Dinner tonight? No dark rooms involved, I promise." I smiled, typing back, "No promises about after dinner, though." The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I tried to focus on layouts and deadlines, but my mind kept wandering to green eyes and soft lips. For the first time in my career, the magazine felt like my side job. Real life, real passion, was waiting elsewhere. As I packed up my things that evening, Marcus caught my eye. "Whatever is going on with you two," he said quietly, "it's beautiful to watch. Just be careful, okay?" I nodded, knowing he was right. In conservative Wichita, we'd need to be discreet. But as I headed to meet Natasha, my heart racing with anticipation, I knew some things were worth the risk. Dating in secret was like being in our own private movie. We found quiet corners of Wichita that became our sanctuaries: a hidden cafe near the river, a small bookstore with a cozy reading nook, parks where we could walk hand in hand under cover of darkness. "I know this great little place," Natasha said one evening, leading me down a narrow alley. The restaurant was tiny, just 6 tables, with mismatched chairs and twinkling lights strung across the ceiling. "How did you find this?" I asked, amazed as the elderly owner greeted Natasha like family. "Sometimes the best things are hidden in plain sight," she winked, squeezing my hand under the table. At work, maintaining professional distance was torture, especially when selecting photos for the magazine's fall fashion spread. Natasha's shots were stunning, too stunning. Each one captured the electricity between us that day in the darkroom. "These are intense," my assistant commented, sorting through the proofs. I quickly shuffled them, hiding the ones where Natasha's gaze burned straight through the lens into my soul. Our nights belonged to us, though. After late editorial meetings, I'd find Natasha waiting in her car around the corner. We'd drive to the outskirts of town, where the prairie stretched endless under starlit skies. "Tell me about your dreams," she'd whisper, her head in my lap as we watched shooting stars. I'd run my fingers through her silk-soft hair and share visions I'd never dared voice before. One night, after a particularly stressful day of dodging office gossip, we ended up at my downtown loft. The city lights sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows as Natasha explored my space, touching photo books and art pieces with reverent fingers. "So this is where the famous Claire Butler lives," she teased, picking up a framed magazine cover, my first as editor. "Not famous," I protested, opening a bottle of wine. "Just dedicated." "Dedicated is sexy," she murmured, taking the glass from my hand and setting it aside. Her kiss tasted of promise and possibility. That night, we crossed a threshold. Every touch was a revelation, every sigh a secret shared. In the soft glow of city lights, we mapped each other's bodies with tender curiosity. Natasha's skin was silk under my fingertips, her whispers of pleasure like poetry. Morning found us tangled in sheets, sunlight painting patterns across bare shoulders. "Stay," I murmured as she stirred, not ready to break our bubble of bliss. "Always," she promised, pressing a kiss to my collarbone. But reality had other plans. That afternoon, I caught whispers in the office hallway. "Did you see how Butler looks at that model? There's definitely something going on there." Panic clawed at my throat. I buried myself in work, barely looking at Natasha during our next shoot. She noticed, of course. "What's wrong?" she asked as we packed up equipment. "People are talking," I admitted. "If my boss finds out..." She silenced my fears with a gentle kiss. "Let them talk, we're not doing anything wrong." But in conservative Kansas media circles, perception was everything. I started scheduling our shoots when the office was nearly empty, buried Natasha's photos in generic fashion spreads. Late at night, in the safety of darkness, guilt would consume me. "I hate hiding you," I whispered against her shoulder one evening. "Then don't," she said simply. "We could just..." "Not yet," I pleaded. "The magazine's my life's work. I can't risk losing it. She nodded, understanding but hurt flickering in her eyes. We both knew this careful dance couldn't last forever. Something had to give. For now, though, we stole our moments where we could. Midnight walks in deserted parks, quiet dinners in hidden restaurants, passionate encounters in my loft high above the city. Each stolen moment made the pretense harder to maintain. In public, we were consummate professionals, the respected editor and her stunning model. But in private, we were simply Claire and Natasha, two women discovering that sometimes life's greatest stories happen off camera. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. "Interesting scoop about your personal life," read the subject line from Scandal Sheet, our sleaziest competitor. My coffee cup nearly slipped from my fingers. "Sources say you're more than just professional with your new favorite model," the email continued. "Care to comment before we run the story?" My hands shook as I called Natasha. "They know," I whispered when she answered. "Scandal Sheet is threatening to publish." "Breathe, love," she said calmly. "We knew this might happen. We'll handle it together." But handling it proved harder than expected. That afternoon, my boss, Robert Thompson, called me into his office. His face was granite as he closed the door. "Claire, there are rumors," he began, adjusting his tie uncomfortably, "about you and Miss Edwards." "Robert, He held up a hand. "I don't want details, but our advertisers are conservative. They're already nervous about the magazine's recent, progressive direction." The threat was clear. Our readership had actually increased since I'd started featuring diverse models and stories, but old money talked louder than new subscribers. That evening, Natasha held me as I cried in frustration. "I've worked 15 years to get here," I said. "How can they reduce everything to gossip?" "Because they're scared of what they don't understand," she replied, stroking my hair. "But you're stronger than their fear." The next blow came from Natasha's agency. They'd received concerns about her recent bookings. Several major clients had mysteriously canceled. "They didn't say why," she told me, trying to sound brave. "Just that I'm not the right fit anymore." I watched helplessly as her phone stopped ringing, her calendar emptying of the prestigious bookings that had been her trademark. My heart broke seeing her professional smile crack under the strain. Marcus tried to help, booking Natasha for independent shoots, but the industry whispers grew louder. "Difficult to work with," they said. "Unprofessional behavior." "Damn them all," I raged one night, pacing my loft. "Your work is better than ever. These photos are incredible." "But they're not looking at the photos anymore," she said quietly. "They're too busy looking for scandal." The pressure built at work too. Robert started questioning every editorial decision, especially anything involving Natasha's images. "Perhaps we should use different models," he'd suggest, voice heavy with implication. I threw myself into work, trying to prove my worth beyond gossip. Late nights at the office became my norm, though they felt empty without Natasha's secret visits. Then came the anonymous letter to our board of directors, filled with grainy photos of us together. Nothing scandalous, just dinner dates, walks in the park, moments we thought were private. "This has to stop," Robert warned me. "The board is concerned about the magazine's reputation." That night, I found Natasha in our hidden cafe, looking defeated. "My agent dropped me today," she said. "Suggested I take some time away from the industry." I reached for her hand across the table, not caring who saw. "We could leave," I suggested wildly. "Start fresh somewhere else." She smiled sadly. "Running won't solve anything. We have to decide what matters more, hiding or living truthfully." The answer seemed impossible. My career, my magazine, everything I'd built versus the woman who'd awakened my heart. The weight of choice pressed down like storm clouds. "Whatever you decide," Natasha whispered, kissing me goodbye that night. "Remember that love isn't wrong. They're wrong for making us choose." I lay awake until dawn, staring at my ceiling, remembering every stolen moment, every secret smile, every passionate encounter. The cost of hiding was destroying us both, piece by piece. Something had to change. I just didn't expect change to come so violently, or so soon. The evening had been perfect. A quiet dinner at our hidden cafe, followed by a walk through the park. Natasha's hand fit perfectly in mine as we strolled under the autumn stars, sharing dreams of a future without shadows. "Let's take the shortcut through Miller's Alley," Natasha suggested, tugging me toward the narrow passage between buildings. The streetlight at the entrance flickered, casting strange shadows. We were halfway through when I heard footsteps behind us, heavy boots on concrete, moving too fast. Natasha's hand tightened in mine. "Well, look what we have here," a rough voice called out. 3 figures emerged from the shadows ahead, blocking our path. More footsteps behind confirmed we were surrounded. "Just let us pass," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Natasha moved closer, her shoulder pressing against mine. "You're that magazine lady," one of them sneered. "Saw your picture in the paper, you and your friend here." The way he said friend made my skin crawl. Natasha straightened her spine, her model's poise turning to steel. "We don't want trouble," she said firmly. "Should have thought of that before you started flaunting yourselves," a female voice spat from behind us, making decent folks sick. Everything happened so fast after that. Someone shoved me hard from behind. I stumbled, losing my grip on Natasha's hand. A fist connected with my jaw, sending me sprawling. Through dazed eyes, I saw Natasha fighting back, her self-defense classes showing as she blocked a punch. But there were too many of them. "Leave her alone!" I screamed, struggling to my feet. Pain exploded in my ribs as a boot connected, but all I could think about was reaching Natasha. She was magnificent in her fury, her blonde hair flying as she fought. But then someone grabbed her from behind, and I heard the sickening crack of her head hitting the wall. Something snapped inside me. I launched myself at her attacker, not caring about the blows raining down. My only thought was protecting her. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Our attackers scattered like cockroaches, leaving us broken and bleeding in the alley. "Natasha?" I crawled to her, panic rising as I saw blood matting her golden hair. "Baby, please open your eyes." Her lashes fluttered. "Claire, are you okay?" Even injured, her first thought was for me. The ambulance lights painted the alley red and blue. The paramedics were gentle but efficient, loading us onto separate stretchers despite my protests. "Please, I need to stay with her," I begged as they wheeled me away. The last thing I saw was Natasha's hand reaching for mine before the ambulance doors closed. The hospital was a blur of harsh lights and concerned faces. X-rays revealed 2 cracked ribs and a sprained wrist. But my physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of not knowing how Natasha was doing. Finally, after what felt like hours, a nurse took pity on me. "Your friend's in room 312, she whispered. "She's been asking for you." I found Natasha propped up in bed, a bandage around her head, her perfect face bruised but beautiful. "Hey, stranger," she smiled weakly. Tears fell as I took her hand, careful of the IV lines. "I thought I'd lost you," I choked out. "Takes more than some cowards in an alley to get rid of me," she said, then winced. Though they did their best. The doctor's report was serious but hopeful: concussion, bruised ribs, sprained ankle. "You both need rest," he insisted. No arguments. But I refused to leave her room. The nurses eventually gave up trying to send me back to my own bed, bringing in a recliner instead. Through the long night, we held hands in the darkness, finding strength in each other's touch. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them hurting her. Every time she stirred in pain, my heart broke anew. "I'm done hiding," I whispered as dawn painted the hospital room pink. "I won't let them make us ashamed." Natasha squeezed my hand. "Together," she murmured sleepily. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." I watched her drift back to sleep, my love for her fiercer than ever. They'd tried to break us but only made us stronger. As the sun rose over Wichita, I knew with absolute certainty this was worth fighting for. Recovery was a slow dance of healing, both physical and emotional. Natasha's concussion meant days of dim lights and quiet rooms. I worked from her hospital bedside, my laptop balanced awkwardly around my bandaged ribs. "You should be resting," she'd scold softly, but her hand would always find mine across the blankets. The attack made headlines: fashion editor and model assaulted. Most coverage was sympathetic, but the comment sections turned toxic. I stopped reading after the 3rd death threat. That's when I started writing. Late at night, watching Natasha sleep, words poured out of me. Not just about the attack, but about love, fear, and the courage to be oneself. "What are you working on?" Natasha asked one evening, catching me typing furiously. "An editorial," I replied. "About us, about everything." Her eyes widened. "Claire, your job?" "Some things matter more," I said firmly, thinking of her broken body in that alley. "I'm done letting fear win." The piece took shape over sleepless nights, raw, honest, unapologetic. I wrote about finding love in a dusty classroom, about midnight walks and stolen kisses, about violence born of ignorance, and the strength found in standing together. When it was finished, I sent it to Robert without hesitation. His reply came within hours. My office. Tomorrow. Natasha insisted on coming with me, though she was still unsteady on her feet. We face this together, she reminded me, squeezing my hand in the elevator. Robert was waiting, my editorial printed on his desk. This is career suicide, he said without preamble. No, I countered, feeling Natasha's strength beside me. This is integrity. What followed was the longest hour of my life. Robert paced, argued, pleaded. But when he saw we wouldn't budge, something shifted in his expression. You really want to do this? I need to do this, I corrected. For everyone who's ever felt they had to hide. He stared out the window for a long moment. Run it, he finally said. But if it backfires... I know, I nodded. Thank you. That night, celebrating in my loft, Natasha read the final version aloud. Her voice caught on certain passages, especially the part about falling in love with her smile in the darkroom. It's beautiful, she whispered, setting down the pages. But are you sure? Instead of answering, I kissed her, slowly, tenderly, mindful of our healing bodies. She melted into me, and soon the editorial was forgotten as we rediscovered each other. Later, tangled in sheets, she traced the fading bruises on my ribs. I was so scared, she admitted. Not of them, but of losing you. Never, I promised, pulling her closer. You're stuck with me now. The editorial ran the following week. My inbox exploded within hours. Hate mail, yes, but also hundreds of messages of support. Stories from others who'd faced similar struggles. Thanks from parents, teenagers, couples who felt less alone. Natasha's agency called, stammering apologies. Major brands were suddenly interested in working with her again, drawn by her newfound authenticity. Funny how they changed their tune, she remarked dryly. Their loss, I said, watching her pose for a new campaign. You're more beautiful than ever. And she was. Something had shifted in her after the attack. Her modeling took on new depth, vulnerability mixed with strength. Every shot told our story, of survival, of love refusing to hide. The magazine's next issue was our highest-selling ever. Letters poured in praising our courage, our honesty. Even Robert had to admit the risk had paid off. But the real victory was smaller, more personal. It was walking down the street holding hands in broad daylight. It was kissing goodbye at the office without checking for witnesses. It was finally being free. I love you, I told her one evening, watching the sunset from our favorite park bench. Every bruise, every battle was worth it for this moment. Her answer was a kiss that tasted of triumph and tomorrow. The email from Sarah, one of our former photography students, caught me off guard. Miss Butler, we're organizing something special. Can you and Miss Edwards come to the Wichita Art Gallery next Saturday? I showed the message to Natasha, who was reviewing proofs from her latest shoot. Her face lit up. Those kids, they're amazing. We arrived at the gallery to find it transformed. Student photographs lined the walls, not just from our summer class, but from schools across Kansas. Each image told a story of acceptance, love, and courage. Welcome to Love Through Their Lens, Maria, now a confident teenager, announced. She'd organized the whole exhibition with help from local arts programs. Tears welled in my eyes as we walked through the gallery. Our former students had captured moments of pure humanity, elderly couples holding hands, children of different races playing. You inspired us, Tommy, the boy who'd once knocked over the tripod, explained. Not just about photography, but about being brave enough to be ourselves. The gallery filled with people, students, parents, artists, journalists. Even Robert showed up, looking surprisingly moved by the displays. This is what happens when we let love win, Natasha whispered, squeezing my hand. Her bruises had faded, but the strength in her eyes burned brighter than ever. Local news crews arrived, drawn by the buzz. Did you know about this? They asked, cameras rolling. These students, I replied, voice thick with emotion, taught us more than we ever taught them. The exhibition became a catalyst. Other galleries reached out, wanting to host similar shows. Schools requested photography workshops focused on diversity and acceptance. My magazine's circulation continued to soar. Our inclusive coverage attracted new advertisers who appreciated our authentic voice. Even the conservative holdouts began to come around. Times are changing, Robert admitted during a board meeting. Thanks to you two, we're leading that change instead of fighting it. Natasha's career transformed too. Major brands sought her out specifically because of her story, her authenticity. She only accepted campaigns that promoted diversity and inclusion. Remember when we thought coming out would end our careers? She laughed one evening, showing me her packed shooting schedule. The highlight came when Sarah won a national photography contest. Her winning image? A candid shot of Natasha and me teaching in that dusty classroom, looking at each other with undisguised affection. I took it that first week, Sarah revealed. I knew there was something special happening even then. The exhibition's success sparked something larger. Community groups organized support rallies, not just for us, but for anyone facing discrimination. One Saturday, we returned to Prairie View Elementary. The art room had been renovated, equipped with new cameras and a proper darkroom. "This is your legacy," the principal said proudly. "You showed these kids that art can change hearts." Standing in that room where it all began, memories washed over me. The first time I saw Natasha in her simple white shirt, our hands brushing in the makeshift darkroom. Every moment leading to now. "We should teach again," Natasha suggested, running her fingers along the new equipment. "Maybe a weekend workshop?" The idea took root. Soon we were planning a series of photography classes, combining technical skills with lessons about representation and acceptance. That evening, watching the sunset from my loft, Natasha showed me her latest project, portraits of love in all its forms. Elderly couples, young families, people of all backgrounds sharing moments of connection. "Beautiful," I murmured. But I wasn't just looking at the photos. She caught me staring and smiled that smile that still made my heart race. "What are you thinking?" "That sometimes the best pictures are the ones we never planned to take," I replied, pulling her close. The gallery exhibition ran for a month, drawing visitors from across the state, but its impact lasted much longer. It showed that two women falling in love in a small-town classroom could ripple out and touch countless lives. "We did good," Natasha said as we locked up the gallery on closing night. "We're just getting started," I promised, kissing her under the Kansas stars. The nomination email arrived during a morning editorial meeting. Editor of the Year wasn't just any award, it was the industry's highest honor. My hands trembled as I read the citation. "For groundbreaking coverage and unwavering commitment to authentic storytelling." "You deserve it," Natasha said later, celebrating over champagne in my office. She'd just returned from Paris Fashion Week, where she'd walked exclusively for designers promoting inclusive beauty standards. The ceremony was set for December in New York. As I packed my acceptance speech into my carry-on, memories of the past year swirled through my mind. The attack, the editorial, the student exhibition. Each challenge had only made us stronger. "Ready?" Natasha asked, stunning in a silver gown she'd saved for the ceremony. The flight to New York felt surreal, our fingers intertwined above the clouds. The ballroom buzzed with industry elite. I spotted Robert at our table, looking prouder than I'd ever seen him. Even some former critics were there, their previous hostility replaced by grudging respect. "The nominees for Editor of the Year," the announcer began. My heart pounded as they played clips from each magazine. When they showed my editorial about love and acceptance, Natasha squeezed my hand under the table. "And the winner is Claire Butler." The room erupted in applause. Natasha's kiss on my cheek gave me courage as I walked to the podium, my heels clicking against the marble floor. "This award," I began, voice steady despite my racing heart, "belongs to everyone who's ever been told their love isn't worthy of celebration. To every person who's faced darkness but chose to shine anyway." Looking out at the crowd, I found Natasha's eyes. "To my partner, who taught me that true beauty lies in being unapologetically yourself. And to our students, who showed us that art can bridge any divide." The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but the real celebration came later, at a tiny jazz club in Greenwich Village. Natasha surprised me by flying in our former students, now high school photographers for their school papers. "To Claire," Maria toasted, raising her soda glass, "who taught us to see beauty in truth." The next morning brought more news. Natasha's agent called. She'd been booked for a groundbreaking international campaign. not just as a model, but as a creative director, showcasing diverse love stories through fashion. They want you to shoot it, she told me excitedly. They loved your editorial photos. Back in Wichita, accolades poured in. The magazine's circulation hit record numbers. Every major fashion brand wanted to work with us. But the real victory was in the letters from readers whose lives we'd touched. Your magazine helped me come out to my parents, one teenager wrote. Seeing your love story gave me courage. Natasha's campaign launched in spring, featuring couples of all kinds sharing authentic moments. The images were raw, beautiful, revolutionary. Fashion critics called it a turning point in advertising. Look what we started, she marveled, showing me the worldwide reaction. Her Instagram followers had doubled overnight, each comment thanking her for changing the narrative. The ceremony's afterglow lingered, but we found ourselves drawn back to simpler moments, teaching weekend workshops at Prairie View, quiet dinners at our hidden cafe, walking hand in hand through Kansas sunsets. Sometimes I wonder, Natasha said one evening, reviewing shots from her campaign, what would have happened if we'd stayed hidden? I thought of my award, gathering dust on my office shelf. We'd have missed everything that matters. The Fashion Awards ceremony was next. Natasha's campaign was nominated for multiple honors. But as we packed for another New York trip, we were already planning our next project. A photography book, she suggested. Real love stories from across America. Starting with ours, I added, pulling her close. The industry had changed, or maybe we'd help change it. Either way, that Editor of the Year award marked more than professional success. It celebrated the power of living truthfully, loving openly, and letting your art speak from the heart. Ready for our next adventure? Natasha asked, zipping up her suitcase. Looking at her, my partner, my muse, my courage, I knew the answer. Every award, every achievement, paled compared to the simple joy of loving her in the light. With you? I smiled. Always. Summer returned to Kansas, bringing with it memories of where our story began. The familiar gravel crunched under our wheels as we pulled into Prairie View Elementary's parking lot, now transformed with fresh paint and blooming gardens. Feels like yesterday, Natasha mused, touching the newly installed darkroom door. Remember how you kept tripping over your heels? We'd returned to launch a special summer program, combining photography with storytelling. The classroom filled with eager faces, some new, some familiar from our first teaching experience. Today's assignment, I announced, is about capturing connections. The students scattered across the school grounds, cameras ready. Watching them work, I saw echoes of our journey. A shy girl finding her voice through the lens. Two best friends discovering their shared passion for art. Each snapshot telling its own story of growth and acceptance. Miss Butler, Miss Edwards, Sarah called out. Now a high school senior, she'd returned as a teaching assistant. Look what Tommy captured. The photo showed Natasha and me in profile, heads bent together over a camera, sunlight haloing our hair. The composition was perfect, the emotion raw and real. You've learned well, Natasha praised, making Tommy blush with pride. During lunch break, we wandered the grounds, remembering. The spot where we first touched, arranging equipment. The window where we'd watched our first storm together. Every corner held whispers of beginning love. I have an idea, Natasha said suddenly, pulling me toward the art room. Inside, she positioned me exactly where we'd stood that first day. What are you up to? I laughed as she adjusted the lighting. Recreating history, she replied, raising her camera. But this time, we're not hiding. The afternoon light painted everything gold, just like that summer day 2 years ago. But now, when our eyes met through the lens, there was no need to look away. Our students caught on, turning their cameras to document the moment. Their images would later become part of a special exhibition, Full Circle, a love story in photographs. As the day wound down, we gathered the class for a final lesson. Photography isn't just about capturing images, I explained. It's about preserving truth. And sometimes, Natasha added, the truth changes lives. The students shared their work, each photo revealing growth beyond technical skill. They'd learned to see beauty in authenticity, strength in vulnerability. Maria's presentation moved us to tears. She'd photographed her 2 moms, finally comfortable being pictured together at her graduation. You showed me it was possible, she said simply. After class, we visited our old hidden cafe. now proudly displaying a rainbow flag in its window. The elderly owner hugged us tight. "You started something beautiful here," she said. Walking through downtown Wichita that evening, we passed the alley where we'd been attacked, but its shadows held no power now. Love had won, transforming fear into triumph. At the local art gallery, preparations were underway for a new exhibition. Our students' work would hang alongside professional photographers, telling stories of acceptance and change. "Remember when we thought we had to choose?" I asked, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold. "Between our careers and our hearts?" Natasha smiled, that same smile that had first captured my soul in a dusty classroom. "We chose both. We chose truth." The next day's class brought a surprise. Our former students had organized a celebration, filling the art room with photos from that first summer. Each image captured a moment of our growing love, seen through innocent eyes. "You taught us more than photography," Tommy said, presenting us with a bound album of their work. "You taught us courage." Standing in that transformed classroom, surrounded by love and art and possibility, I felt everything come full circle. We'd returned to where it began, but this time as our true selves. "Ready for the next chapter?" Natasha whispered, her hand finding mine. Looking at our students, their cameras capturing this moment of completion, I knew. Every step, every struggle, had led us right where we needed to be. "With you?" I smiled. "I'm ready for anything." The prairie sunset painted the sky in shades of promise, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, not as a warning, but as applause. The autumn leaves danced around us as Natasha and I walked through the renovated Prairie View Elementary grounds. The photography workshop had grown into something bigger than we'd imagined, a full-fledged arts program reaching schools across Kansas. "Remember our first class here?" I asked, pausing by the old oak tree. Its branches had witnessed our love story from the beginning. "How could I forget? You were so overdressed," she teased, then grew serious. "I have something to show you." She led me to the art room, now a state-of-the-art studio thanks to grants and community support. But instead of students, we found it filled with photographs, hundreds of them, covering every wall. "What is this?" I breathed, recognizing moments from our journey. The first day of class, the darkroom kiss, the hospital recovery. Each image told part of our story. "Keep walking," Natasha urged, guiding me through the makeshift gallery. The final wall held a single empty frame, beneath it a small black box. My heart stopped. "Natasha." She took my hands, green eyes shining. 2 years ago, in this room, I fell in love with a city girl in ridiculous heels. Every moment since then has been better than any photograph could capture. Dropping to one knee, she opened the box. The ring caught the afternoon light, sending rainbows dancing across the walls. "Claire Butler, will you marry me?" "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes." Cheers erupted from the hallway. Our former students poured in, cameras clicking, capturing the moment they'd helped plan. Even Robert was there, grinning broadly. The wedding plans came together naturally. We chose the gallery where our students' exhibition had first shown, transforming it into a celebration of love and art. "Something old," Maria announced at the rehearsal, presenting us with a framed photo from our first class. "When you didn't think anyone noticed how you looked at each other." The ceremony was intimate but powerful. We wrote our own vows, promising to keep choosing truth, keep fighting for love, keep seeing beauty through each other's eyes. Instead of traditional wedding photos, we gave our students free rein to document the day. Their images captured moments no professional could, the raw emotion, the genuine joy, the triumph of love over fear. The reception turned into an impromptu gallery showing. Guests wandered between displays, chronicling our journey, from that first summer to our engagement, each photo telling part of our story. "To the brides," Robert toasted, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught us all to see love differently." Later, dancing under twinkling lights, Natasha whispered, "I have another surprise." She revealed plans for a new venture, a nationwide photography program teaching acceptance through art. We'd travel across America, sharing our story, inspiring others to capture and celebrate love in all its forms. "Ready for a new adventure?" she asked. Looking around at our gathered family, blood and chosen, students and friends, I felt overwhelming gratitude. Every struggle had led to this moment. Every battle had made our love stronger. "With you?" I smiled, touching my ring. Always. The next morning, we packed for our honeymoon, a cross-country journey combining wedding celebration with launching our new program. Our first stop, the rural Kansas school where two women had found the courage to love openly. Full circle, Natasha mused as we drove past the prairie sunset. No, I corrected, taking her hand. Just the beginning. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories don't end, they evolve, touching other lives, inspiring new chapters. Our love had started in a dusty classroom, but its light would reach far beyond those walls. And somewhere in another small town, another couple might see our story and find the courage to write their own. That's the power of love captured through a lens. It multiplies, illuminates, transforms. Ready? Natasha asked, starting the car. I looked at my wife, still amazed by how that word felt, and knew. Every frame of our story had led to this moment, but the best photographs were yet to be taken. With you? I smiled. I'm ready for everything. The Kansas wind carried the scent of possibility as we drove toward tomorrow, our cameras ready to capture whatever beauty awaited. Because the greatest love stories, like the best photographs, never truly end, they just keep developing.